Hey guys, welcome back. So different from usual, today I'll be reviewing a dongle DAC amp, and here is the IBasso DC07 Pro. It is the latest dongle DAC amp from IBasso, featuring 4 Cirrus Logic CS43121 DAC chips inside of it. Not only that, IBasso has also included many other features compared to their other dongle that I will get down to it later. For now, here are some of the technical numbers that I'll put onto the screen. You can also visit their website to learn more about the dongle. For the price, the DC07 Pro is currently selling for $199. I would like to give my thanks to Mr. Paul from IBasso for sending this dongle DAC amp to me in exchange for an honest review and impression. So here is the box that the DC07 Pro comes with. When we open it up, we can see the dongle up front along with all the other accessories below of it. I applaud IBasso for including the high quality OTG cables right out of the box, both in Type-C and Lightning port versions. This means that the DC07 Pro should be compatible with an Android phone along with newer and older generation iPhone. The cable has similar material to the CB19 OTG cable as well. They also include a USB-C to USB-A adapter so that you can use the dongle with your laptop USB-A port. I wish they could have included a small leather case inside the box too. For the build quality, the DC07 Pro has a CNC aluminum body with a matte glass panel on one side and an OLED screen on the other side. On one end, it has the 3.5 single-ended and 4.4 balance ports. The other end is the female Type-C connection. It also has a rotary adjustment button or a knob on each side. It is used for volume control and settings. The knob has a soft tactile feedback while spinning, but a more clicky, snappier sound when clicking it. The knob can also be spun freely either way with no physical limitation. The knob feels a bit loose with some play to it, but IBasso has assured me that it is fine, that it's just the way it is and it is actually quite stable. I personally don't care much about it, it's just something that I notice. Going into the settings and such, so you press the button once to light the screen up or off. I'll put up the information of what all the letters and numbers on the screen indicate. When the screen is on, you press and hold the knob to enter the setting menu. Honestly, I think it is a bit annoying that you would rotate the knob to browse the settings and press the knob to change them. I think it is more logical for it to be reversed, as in press the knob to browse and rotate the knob to change the settings instead. You can also use the IBasso UAC app to adjust those settings. Inside the app, you will see the volume level that you're at from 0 to 100. Next are the 5 filters that you can choose. I personally heard very little changes, subtle nuances in between the filters. So most of the time, I just settle with the non-oversampling mode for the ease of my mind. Below that is the high pass filter, which to my ears cuts down the low bass frequency region, reducing the bass rumble a little bit, so it is no surprise that I always turn this filter off. Next is the gain level. You can either pick low, medium, or high gain. Next is the SPDIF mode, the screen orientation, and the off-screen volume knob. This setting is quite important because since the knob is so easy to spin, if you were to use the DC07 Pro with it dangling around your pants pocket, then you may change the volume accidentally. By turning this mode off, as long as the screen is not on, you can't change the volume even if you turn the volume knob. The last setting is the screen time to adjust how long until the screen turns off. And that is basically all the functionality of the DC07 Pro. Regarding the volume change, so when spinning the knob to adjust the volume, even if you spin it really fast, the volume changes accordingly with no skipping. Onto the sound impression, I set the DC07 Pro to the non-oversampling mode at mid-gain. Here are some IMs that I used for the review. First is the Penon C0 and SingGod EA1000 to check the bass texture and the overall timbre. Next is the Short Burst Glamdring, a modded S12. It is a very revealing IM, helping me spot the treble glare in some DAC amp, as well as having a really wide stage presentation. These are the 3 main IMs. and for the part of the mid-range and treble, I adjust that with all my other IM in my rotation. The DC07 Pro, to my ears, has a very neutral and flat tonality with very little coloration. The bass is well extended, has good punch and rumble, feels well controlled overall, but the texture does feel a bit soft and linear. The mids are quite neutral, stay relatively uncolored, vocals have good clarity and transparency, instruments have a relatively natural timbre and texture. The treble is airy, resolving with a lot of micro nuances and does not have a treble glare like some dongle with ASS Sabre DAC out there. Technicality-wise, it has a very open and wide stage presentation with decent imaging and layering capability. For the overall sound characteristic or the timbre signature of the dongle, whether it's on a more analog side or hi-fi side, if we were to put it into numbers and consider -10 as the most analog and 10 as the most digital, for reference, I would consider the Hebe FC6 to be around -3.5 mark, so the most analog dongle I've heard, and the E1DA 90380 like around 3.5 mark. So with that out of the way, on the -10 to 10 scale, I think the DC07 Pro is in the balanced range of analog and digital sounding. For more on the hi-fi side, but only at around level 1 or 2. Synergy-wise, with its uncolored tonality, the DC07 Pro can synergize well with all sorts of IM in my collection, from warm-sounding one to a more neutral or brighter ones. For efficiency, I found that the DC07 Pro is really efficient, as my Poco F3 drops the battery around 10% after more than 1 hour of use. Also, the DC07 Pro stays warm and not too hot even after a long time period. For power, the specification said that the DC07 Pro has 430 milliwatts of power per channel, with the balance port of course. During my review, I've rarely had to use the full volume at high gain with the DC07 Pro, never with IM, but only a few times with harder to drive earbuds. With easy to drive IM like the SIMGARD EA1000, the dynamism of the bass, the staging, and the details are very well captured by the 07 Pro. For the glamdring, the DC07 Pro also drives it perfectly fine. The bass is really fast and full, while the stage sounds really wide open. With a harder to drive earbuds like the TCX Ear Totem, I have to crank up the volume to around 90 out of 100 at high gain to reach the desired listening volume. Although sounding decent with how it conveys the soundstage elements, the bass dynamics was just not tight enough for me, desiring just a little bit more juice from the dongle. Onto the comparison, the first comparison that I would do against it is the IBasso DC04 Pro. Last year, it is one of the most hyped and loved dongles with its performance for the money at the time. It was ranked quite highly by Mr. Andy from Dongle Madness. The DC04 Pro is priced at around $120, featuring only 2 CS4021 DAC chips instead of 4. The build quality was a bit similar on both, as the DC04 Pro has an aluminum chassis and a glass panel, but it has 2 independent volume control buttons instead of the rotary knob. It also doesn't have a screen for the ease of control, only a small LED indicator right here. The included cables are worse in quality than the one that comes with the DC07 Pro. Onto the sound, well, the DC04 Pro is unsurprisingly has a very similar sound quality or sound DNA as the DC07 Pro, meaning that it is on the neutral side, has decently controlled bass, uncolored mids, and airy treble, with an also decent wide and open stage. On the timbre signature scale, I also rate it at around 1.5 level, give and take. That being said, the DC07 Pro seemingly improved something that I didn't know the DC04 Pro lacks, that I didn't notice it when listening to the DC04 Pro alone. First is the bass, using the Panel Zero and some bass drum or cello tracks to test it out. The bass on the DC07 Pro is slightly fuller, more well controlled, and the bass has better definition to them. The mid-range sounds more natural to my ears than the DC04 Pro. The DC04 Pro's mid-range sounds drier in comparison. The note weight is a bit denser on the 07 Pro as well. For the treble, the DC07 Pro has a bit smoother treble response, less sharp and less forceful feeling. Technical performance-wise, to my ears, the width is similar, but the depth and the layering is improved on the DC07 Pro. Now, this question is that should you upgrade from the DC04 Pro to the DC07 Pro? Or should you get the DC07 Pro when you already have the DC04 Pro like me? I mean, we are looking at an $80 price jump right here. To me, from a pure sound perspective, I think yes, but just barely. Don't get me wrong, the DC07 Pro does sound better than the DC04 Pro, but not 2 times better. The DC04 Pro itself is already a good dongle. There's a reason why it got so much hype and love last year. The DC07 Pro added some improvements here and there while keeping the same DNA in sound. If we are going by percentage, then I would say the DC07 Pro is around 25 to 30% better than the DC04 Pro, with every improvement accumulated. But if you are taking the whole package into consideration, then I would wholeheartedly say yes. The added functionality along with the improvements on the sound performance does make the upgrade worth it. I really like the knob and the screen of the DC07 Pro, as it makes the volume control a lot less of a hassle. The second dongle that I will compare the DC07 Pro with is the DC Elite. For the price, the DCE is selling for $499 on Hi-Fi Go, so that is $300 more than the DC07 Pro. For the build quality, the DCE is made out of titanium. It is bigger and way heavier than DC07 Pro. It also doesn't have a screen, only a button on each side. This button lets you control the volume mode of the DCE as well as the SPDIF mode. The DCE uses a proprietary ROM DAC chip, trickled down from their flagship DX320 Max DAP. Both of these dongles have a knob on them, but the DCE's knob only serves as a volume adjustment knob, while the 07 Pro knob is to adjust both the volume and the settings. The DCE's knob feels way tighter and harder to turn, and it only has around 23 steps as opposed to the free spin type of the 07 Pro. The quality of the knob on the DCE feels way more premium. If I use the DCE and dangle it around my pants pocket, then it is near impossible for me to get it to accidentally change the volume level. Regarding the sound quality, let me just say that the DCE almost destroyed the DC07 Pro. I mean, yes, they're both very transparent dongle DAC amp, as every DAC amp should be, but the way they present the sound is very different. While the DC07 Pro focuses on being neutral, chill, and soft in its presentation, the first thing that I noticed with the DCE is its heightened sense of control across the spectrum, along with its revealing characteristic. For the bass, while the DC07 Pro has a bit linear and chill vibe regarding the bass texture, the DCE sounds way tighter, the bass driver feels livelier, the bass region is not boosted, it is just highly controlled. The impact of the mid-bass is more powerful on the DCE, the decaying of the notes is quicker as well. Like with the Pennon Zero, I always thought that it is sort of focuses on being warm, neutral, and natural and relaxing. This is with the Code Mojo, by the way. But when using it with the DCE, the bass texture is tightened to the roof. Each basses are now being more cleanly separated and more definitive. Traditional drums now don't sound as boomy and mushy, now it's more compacted. This behavior is consistent on many other IAMs as well, like with the Zigat Arete or the Dunu Da Vinci. With the DC07 Pro, the bass sounds a bit softer, looser, and more linear, while the tone and timbre remains relatively the same. For the mid-range, the DCE added a lot of textures into the vocals and the instruments. It highlights many subtle nuances that you use to decipher each element in the musical arrangements more accurately. It's a bit cliche, but I've heard many more things in the mid-range that I have not heard before with other sources. The mids aren't quite my forte when doing reviews, but the differences that the DCE has is immediately noticeable. The positioning of the mid-range instruments and vocals also feel like it has taken a step backward, which makes the DC07 Pro sound deeper. For the treble range, the DCE reveals a lot of micro details. It definitely has higher resolution than the DC07 Pro. The DC07 Pro's treble in comparison is safer and more easy on the ear. For the technical performance, the DCE sounds really wide and grand. It just simply sounds more open to me with more distinct layering. The stage of the DCE is almost 1.5 times larger than the DC07 Pro. For timbre signature, to me, the DCE is more digital or hi-fi than the DC07 Pro. I will put it at around 2.5 to 3 marks. Overall, the DCE may come off as over-processing or too fake sounding to some, which explains the love and the hate for this dongle depending on one's preference. Synergy-wise, the DCE is not as versatile as the DC07 Pro. Since it's an already highly technical dongle, when pairing it with the EPZ 530, being a bright V-shaped 4-way IM, it makes the 530 quite fatiguing to my ears. It makes an already highly technical IM even more technical. The DC07 Pro eases out the brightness of the 530, making it less sharp overall and just makes the 530 more enjoyable. Truth be told, I think the DCE is the best sounding dongle that I've heard, even better than the KANA RU7 based on my memory. It sounds better than the DC07 Pro for sure, most of the time. However, the DC07 Pro is way more valued for the money when judging it as a whole package deal. If I were to jump from the DC07 Pro to the DCE, I would be sacrificing too much functionality for additional sound performance. If money is no object and you want a dongle that sounds like an expensive DAC, then by all means get the DCE. But if you are like me and many others who are cautious about their hard-earned money, then the DC07 Pro is a much more logical pick. And also, ironically, even if I have the DCE, I wouldn't or shouldn't use it as much when reviewing my IMs, as it makes almost every IM sounds way better. In and of itself is not a bad thing, but most people I know usually spend more money on their IM and transducers rather than the DAC amp. As a reviewer, I usually review IM under $400, so it is more logical for me to use a bit of cheaper source so that it would be more aligned with many people. It's no surprise that I will use the DC07 Pro quite a lot for my future IM reviews. The last dongle that I will compare with is the EPZ TP50. It is also at a similar price range to the DC04 Pro. Build-wise, the DC07 Pro is a bit smaller and looks way more elegant. Both has an LED screen so that you can see the information and the settings menu. The screen of the DC07 Pro is wider but shorter than the TP50s. The TP50 has 3 buttons, 2 for volume and 1 for the setting menu. You can also configure it so that you either control the volume or to play pause and skip the tracks. The TP50 only has 2 gains level and there is no dedicated control app on Android and iOS. The TP50 lets you control the brightness of the screen, so that is a plus. Onto the sound, the TP50 is also on a neutral spectrum with a bit of analytical edge to it. Side by side, the TP50 is a bit more W-shaped, with the bass, mids, and treble region sound equally emphasized. The DC07 Pro is a bit more U-shaped in comparison, due to how the mid-range was done. The TP50 has a bit more organic mid-range, instruments are more evenly spread out. The mids on the DC07 Pro is much cleaner, taking a step backward and making it sound quite linear, almost like having less volume. The TP50's tone and timbre is a bit fuller, both of them all sound natural. The bass texture is really close between these two, but I would say the TP50 has a bit more heft and depth, while the DC07 Pro's bass is cleaner, having less weight and better note definition. Treble-wise, the DC07 Pro is still a better performer, as it still has a bit more air and sparkles, better transients, and feels a bit more extended overall. Soundstage and imaging, the DC07 Pro takes the win. It is wider and more open. The separation was surprisingly close between the two, with the DC07 Pro just a bit better. When I'm talking about the separation, I'm thinking about how you can dissect your music into each separate part, like the sub-bass, mid-bass, the vocals, the instruments, the percussion, the clap, cymbals, and many more. So from this comparison, it just highlights the fact that the TP50 is a dongle with a really high price-to-performance ratio, going hand-to-hand with a more expensive dongle. I like the form factor of the DC07 Pro more, and the sound is better on the DC07 Pro on many parts, but not all of them. If I'm really tight on budget, I would happily take the TP50. In conclusion, the DC07 Pro is a really nice and welcome product from IBasso, but as good dongle are getting cheaper and cheap dongle are getting better, the DC07 Pro is on a bit spendy side of things. It is certainly not cheap, but the overall package makes its price tag justified. The sound quality, like I have talked about, is very neutral and technical. If you want that type of sound in a small, light dongle DAC amp that also has a lot of functionality and is heavily efficient, I would highly recommend this dongle. That's it for my review, and thank you for watching.